Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Behind the Film podcast. I'm your host, Nick.
And I'm your host, Oliver. Today, we'll be discussing our favourite films and least favourite films of 2019 and just discussing the cinema within 2019 as a whole.
Yes, 2019 was a pretty great year for movies overall, I would say, though there was some disappointments.
Yeah, well, I think it's made up for this year a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. So this episode, because there's so many things to talk about, we've decided to essentially have a super long recording, and we're going to divide this recording into different parts and upload them separately onto the channel. So there you go. So first of all, we'll start off with our top 10 favorite films from 2019 individually. So Oliver, what was your number 10 film?
My 10th favourite from last year was The Irishman.
Yes.
And I thought it was, despite being such a long film, I think with that cast and with that director, you can't really go wrong. And I thought it was quite a good story, despite the extremely long length, which really sort of lowered my enjoyment level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I also have The Irishman on my list. I won't say where, but The Irishman. I'm kind of happy that it's on Netflix because it allows you to kind of stop it. Because I recently rewatched it, and I did it over 2 days in 2 sittings, which kind of, it's a good breath of fresh air because not only is it a long film, but there's like a lot of detail, and it's a pretty huge plot, and it's a lot to take in. So being able to kind of do it separately is a good addition.
Okay.
What were your thoughts on the acting in the film?
Oh, well, it's Robert De Niro is one of the greats. Al Pacino. No, it's like the acting was quite good. Well, I think I need to watch it again. And Joe Pesci, actually, sorry.
Yes.
I think I'd really need to watch it again though, just to sort of figure out how much I do enjoy it. Because having such a long movie, it's like difficult to know what's going, especially the first time watching it, I feel.
No, yeah, I agree. Yeah, because I watched it for the first time way back at the start of November at an early screening, and I watched the whole thing in a theater. And I went in, and it was daytime, and I came out, and it was nighttime.
Yeah.
And it was certainly a lot to take in, and it felt long in a theater. But I really do think that being on Netflix is a really good added benefit.
Yeah.
I thought that the script was really good. It's kind of different. I think you'd agree to something like Goodfellas.
Yeah. Very different, yeah.
Well, because I think The Irishman is kind of a more slower and contemplative film. Like Goodfellas, I like Goodfellas more than The Irishman, for sure. But, in Goodfellas, it's kind of very sort of aggressive and violent.
It's much more tense, I think.
Yes, I agree.
Throughout the whole thing.
Whereas The Irishman, when you look at it, it's really not when compared to other Scorsese films, it's kind of toned down, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of like how intense it is.
I think so too.
You can look at this compared to something like Raging Bull, which is a really high intensity film.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't sure if that was just, I felt like that because it was so long. Yeah, but now that you've seen it again, I think that's just the style that he's going for.
Yeah, it's almost like Scorsese is kind of tributing his own career. Because I've got to be honest, I don't really think that we're going to get another sort of grand gangster movie with De Niro and Pesci and Scorsese again.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not. So it was kind of the end of an era, which is sad.
Yeah. We got the Killers of the Flower Moon next year.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That should be good. Apparently, I heard some interesting stuff that apparently because he was in a deal with Paramount or something, but apparently there's some disagreements with the funding for the film because it's going to be very expensive. So it might happen that Scorsese will team up with Netflix again.
Well, that'd be good.
No, I think that'd be very good.
Yeah. Netflix wins all the Academy Awards again.
I know. Well, I really respect Netflix. I mean, they have the money and they're like, okay, we'll fund your movie. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, but it's becoming a bit of a monopoly, you know? Like, what is it? Disney, who owns Star Wars and Marvel, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Netflix, who spend like $17 billion a year on stuff. I don't know. I just think it could threaten cinema a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Scorsese, with The Irishman, he wanted there to be like a longer cinema release.
Yeah.
Because it was only like 2 weeks and it was limited screenings for The Irishman before it went straight to Netflix.
Yeah.
And he's obviously a huge believer in, cinema, like being at the theater and whatever. So it certainly is an interesting kind of predicament, especially for the future, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, yeah, it's just sort of hard to know where it's going to end up going.
So my number 10 favorite film is a film that you haven't seen yet. It's called Waves. It's directed by, what's his name? Try Edward Schultz. And this was kind of people were kind of mixed on the film. A lot of people liked it. A lot of people didn't like it. I was a pretty big fan of it. It is essentially chronicling just kind of this family's life, specifically focusing on the two children and kind of the everyday problems that they can deal with, and that families deal with. I won't talk about it too much because you haven't seen it, but it is a really like heartwarming film. It's got great performances and cinematography. I was kind of let down with the music choices because there is an insane amount of Kendrick and Kanye and all this sort of stuff, which really shouldn't be in certain scenes where it was supposed to be really dramatic, and then Kanye West just starts blaring out.
Yeah, that's cool for a dramatic man.
Yes, well, it was certainly odd, but overall, it's still a very good movie, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
What was your number 9?
Yeah, my number 9 was Marriage Story, which, well, hearing you say all that stuff about Waves is quite similar to Marriage Story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so wait, where did you... Oh, you don't have to say, I guess, but...
Yeah, I'll just mention it when we get there, because Marriage Story is actually higher on my top 10.
Yeah. Well, I gave it 9 out of 10, and I just thought the acting was so good, because the first time that I watched it, I thought it was so boring, right? But then I sort of, I kept sort of thinking about it, and I think I watched it again, and I realized that, oh damn, it's not, it's like the plot is quite simple, but then the acting and I think the script must make it, that must be what's making it like so boring, but then boring in a good way, because it just seems so natural, And then watching it for a second time, it's not, watching it differently, it's not as boring.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if I mentioned this because we've covered Marriage Story in our first podcast when we talked about the Best Picture nominees.
Yeah.
And I do think I remember saying I thought it was quite interesting how the cinematography was used, because there's not a lot of cutting. Like there will be so many shots of just 5 minutes long that the camera won't move, and it will just show Scarlett Johansson and whatever talking about stuff. And I kind of, those camera tricks, along with the excellent script and performances, kind of brought the whole feeling of naturalness, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Like, you didn't notice, it was completely off your mind by 30 minutes into the movie that you're watching like this big movie set,
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was kind of so humble in how good it was, because I liked how it didn't overly dramatize the whole divorce process. Like, it was a very realistic depiction.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of expect something like this to have so much like screaming and yelling scenes between the main characters, but there was only one scene
Yeah.
where they kind of yelled at each other, and the rest of it was just very sort of isolated emotions, which is kind of
Yeah.
like what it is.
Yeah.
And that was the only negative for me with the movie, is just kind of, it's not a particularly original concept. It's
Yeah.
a very basic story, which is, I think, why you have it kind of lower in your top 10.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever seen a film focusing on divorce as a concept done this well.
Yeah. I don't think so either. I think
Yeah,
there's a real sort of augmented view on that sort of theme, you know?
I agree.
But
Uh,
speaking of Scarlett Johansson, um, well, one of the films that I think both of us, oh no, just me, was Jojo Rabbit. That was my number 8. Well, no, tied 7 with another film. But what did you think of Jojo Rabbit, Nick?
um, I didn't like Jojo Rabbit.
Mm.
Uh, I didn't hate it. Upon reflection, I think I said in the episode 1 podcast again that Jojo Rabbit was my least favorite of the nominated films. I would
Okay.
probably change that, and I'll kind of get there when we get there. It's certainly a watchable movie, and it's got a lot of great comedy, and a couple of really well done emotional moments. Um, I also really love the sort of color grading of the film, because
Yeah.
you look at the costume design, and all the Nazis are kind of dressed up in this sort of very faded, beigey looking costumes, and it makes the uh, swastika really stand out,
Yeah.
and look intimidating, which I think was a nice addition.
Yeah.
But I found the movie to be very choppy and unfocused, personally. I
Yeah,
thought that
no,
it didn't
it went through drama and comedy a bit too, like,
quickly.
yeah,
Like, it would transition comedy to drama to comedy so much that I got like whiplash from it, and I had no idea why. Like, I wasn't getting sort of any emotional investment, because it wasn't kind of handled correctly, I would say. But
yeah.
what did you like about the movie?
Well, I think this is the sort of film that you have to see in the cinema, like with a bunch of people, which unfortunately you can't really do right now.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I did.
yeah, well, I saw it in the cinema as well. Um, and I just thought it was a really good comedy. Like, I thought it was really funny. Um, and I can see your points with the switching between drama and comedy, and I agree that it was done a bit too much, but it still was a really good film. I thought, like, it didn't. Well, it gave you whiplash. I didn't think that it was that big of a deal. You know?
Yeah, well, the comedy kind of undercut a lot of the dramatic moments, and then I would be laughing, and then a very sort of sad dramatic thing happened, and because of that, I never managed to kind of get into the film and just kind of let it take me away. Kind of like Marriage Story. I just sat down and I was fully with the film and invested. Whereas
Yeah,
Jojo, I kept getting taken out of the movie because of all the really bad tonal changes. And I was shocked that it won Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars, and it beat films like Little Women and The Irishman.
yeah,
Anyway, yeah, they were my thoughts. I still really support Taika Waititi as a director. I think he's
yeah.
great.
Mm.
Really loved. I saw a film of his recently called What We Do in the Shadows, which was a really great comedy that he filmed in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and then Hunt for the Water People, obviously.
yes, that I think that's probably my favorite of his personally.
Yeah, okay.
Uh,
Well, my second favorite after JoJo.
yeah. My Going back
Oh,
to
you're
my
number 10, wasn't it?
Pardon?
You're number 9. We missed
Yeah,
out on.
yeah. My number 9 film was Uncut Gems, directed by the Safdie brothers. Uncut Gems, I'll kind of, because you'll talk about it when you get to your.
No, well, Uncut Gems is tied with Jojo Rabbit at number 7.
Yeah. So Uncut Gems is at 9 for me. I thought that the film had great intensity. The biggest thing for me that I loved about it was just that Adam Sandler was really good, which
Fair.
was a shock because he's barely ever good. Like, there's only a couple of films like Paul Thomas Anderson's Punch Drunk Love where like Sandler has been really good, but I think this could be like a career high performance from him.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
yeah,
it was winning that there was no like Academy recognition.
no, which was quite unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because the film was very good. I thought that they did a lot of interesting things with lighting and cinematography. I think you remember that part where he goes into the nightclub and the weekend there
Yeah.
for some reason.
Why is the weekend there?
I don't know, but I really liked what they did there with they made it so like loud and claustrophobic, and it just kind of built up all the tension in the film really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a very good movie.
Yeah, well, I think like it makes you sort of tighten up. It just makes you feel tense, and I don't know. I thought that was done really, really well. Yeah, that was just my favorite part.
My only problem with the film and why it's at number 9 is because I didn't really. There were times where I couldn't really invest in the main character because he keeps gambling all the time, and I understand that he does it, frequently, but I couldn't because I think you were supposed to get very invested in his character, but I wasn't really. Like I cared about his family because I felt like, oh, he keeps just dicking them over with all their money, which was a problem. But for him, the protagonist that we're following, I think they didn't do a good enough job for me to fully invest in the story. But that is a kind of a minor complaint overall because the film was very good.
Yeah, well, I think that's why. Well, that is why I've tied it with Jojo Rabbit at number 7. Like it's because like similar to Jojo Rabbit, there's no connection to the characters, but with Jojo Rabbit, they've got a little bit of an excuse. But the fact that they're winning, best adapted screenplay at the Oscars, I don't think that really makes sense for Jojo Rabbit. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll quickly say my number 8 because it's another film that you haven't seen, Oliver. Midsommar, I believe is how it's said.
I've been meaning to see it for months though.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic horror film. It stars Florence Pugh in what I think is her best role that I've seen her in so far. It's by Ari Aster, who also made Hereditary, which you have seen, I believe.
Yeah.
Which was another excellent horror film. I think Midsommar I probably enjoyed even more. So essentially, it's about a group of teenagers who go to this festival in Sweden, I believe. And it's once every year festival, and weird stuff starts to happen. And it's just a really disturbing and horrific film, but also really enjoyable. I find Ari Aster to be quite an interesting filmmaker because he's clearly focused on horror, but both of his horror movies are not like the standard horror films. He really puts a lot of time into making sure that you care about the characters. And both films, this and Hereditary, which was in 2018, were really long. Like they're both over 2 hours, which is pretty long for a horror film. The reason I've got it at 8 is because, like I said, there's a group of teenagers, including Florence Pugh and her boyfriend, and then a couple other friends. And the only problem was I wasn't really invested in any of the other teenagers other than Florence Pugh. If they built up the kind of emotional connection between them, which I've heard they do in the director's cut, which I have unfortunately not seen. But from what I'm going off on the theatrical cut is they could have improved that more. But overall, very well done film.
Yeah, well, I think horror is a really difficult genre to make a good film in, you know?
Oh, I agree. Yeah, it is different. Difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, the fact that I haven't seen Midsommar, but I saw Hereditary, and that was like a super cool film, and it was really unexpected for me.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that's Ari Aster. I think that's a really cool thing that he can be able to produce these great horror films that aren't generic and aren't, boring.
What's the thing is, I really like horror films. Like if they're done well, they can be really great.
Yeah.
And the problem is nowadays there's really nothing new with horror films. I mean, I saw a lot of horror films in 2019, and when we get to talking about our worst films, I'll mention some of them. But I was happy to see that there were actually a couple good horror films still being made in 2019.
Yeah, well, there's been a couple of recent ones. You know, like Get Out was really good as well. And then Us, I thought was quite good.
Yeah, well, we'll probably, because that's also in your list. It's not in your top 10, but we'll probably get there soon.
Yeah.
Before we move on to your number 6, I'll quickly say that my number 7 was Marriage Story, and my number 6 was The Irishman. I don't really need to go into those because we've already discussed them. But I really love both those films, obviously, and I recommend them a lot. So, Oliver, what was your number 6 film?
My number 6 was Ford v Ferrari.
Ford v Ferrari.
Yeah, and like I can see now that a lot of them that are in my top 10 are just Best Picture nominees.
Yeah, that's kind of a little problem. Just that we've covered them in our previous podcast, but I don't believe that we went too in depth with Ford v Ferrari. So explain what you liked so much about it.
Oh, well, I haven't seen it in a while. I think I need to rewatch it. But seeing it in a cinema is like so good. Like I think most racing movies, seeing them in a cinema is so good because there's, you can get away with having this huge rumble and of the engine. And so the sound design I thought was really, really good. But then, also the cinematography was really, really good, and the acting. Sorry, that's just the main things.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting. I've kind of looked at what people are thinking about it, and a lot of people, when these are just reviews I've read online, discussing, all the films that were nominated for Best Picture, right? Interestingly enough, most people were saying that the one film that shouldn't have been nominated was Ford v Ferrari.
Really?
Really, they would prefer to include Jojo and Joker rather than Ford v Ferrari, which I found kind of interesting because I think Ford v Ferrari is a very it's almost like a kind of guaranteed Best Picture nominee,
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think that's fair enough because it's not a extremely unique story,
No,
you can you can tell what's going to happen.
But it's certainly done very well.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I've given it such a high rating. Like it was quite a great film. But then, like I can see how people can think that, like just looking at the reviews now, someone said, "Made for dads by dads."
That's actually
I can see their point on that, I guess. But I thought it was really good though.
No, yeah. Well, I wasn't super hot on it. There were a few things that I wasn't a big fan of. I thought that the only kind of problem was the script wasn't the greatest. I think where the movie shines is kind of just completely in the technical elements, like the sound design and kind of how they managed to do all the stuff with the cars was incredible, I think. That's what stood out to me anyway. I also thought Christian Bale was a big standout as in the film.
Yeah, well, he's really good.
Mm,
Like Matt Damon, it doesn't seem like he's really acting, but then Christian Bale, it's like he really varies from character to character. You know?
mm. Well, I mean, yeah, you can just look at. I think there are other Christian Bale films in our list here that we might discuss later. But I do respect him for certainly picking different roles and kind of really committing to them.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah.
yeah. Well, he does them really well as well.
Mm. So moving on to my number five.
Yeah.
My number five film was Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which is a French film by Celine Sciamma and tells the story of a painter who has to paint the portrait of this woman who's about to be married without her realizing. And that's essentially all I'll say. Certainly an interesting film between the two of us because I was a huge fan of it. I thought it was excellent, but you weren't so keen, were you, Oliver?
No, well, I think like you've talked about it, and you've said that it's not it's definitely not a fast film. Let's put it that way.
No, it's slow. I fully
Yeah.
agree that it is slow as hell.
But and to some extent, and with some films with some themes, I can really enjoy that and really get into it. But I just felt like the technical aspects were there, especially with the cinematography. So that's why I did end up giving it 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
But I just didn't I wasn't interested in it. There was no yeah, I think just because it has such a slow pacing to it, and yeah, there was just not much going on. I sort of from the beginning or from 30 minutes in, I just kept realizing, okay, I'm in the cinema in my seat. It's not encapsulating my attention.
Yeah. No, I certainly think that it's not a movie for everyone. I mean, it's definitely kind of a period piece. And I am a huge fan of kind of period piece movies. One of my all-time favorite films is Barry Lyndon by Stanley Kubrick, which is another film that's really slow and is about, kind of the 18th century, just like I think this thing was. But I loved the movie. Obviously, the cinematography, like you mentioned, was possibly the best of the year, like up there for me.
Yeah.
It was shot in 8K, which would have been insane to kind of make.
Mm.
And it
Yeah.
looks excellent. Like,
SD card.
I can't wait again to watch it on Blu-ray
Yeah.
because I'll probably get it. And it's a great sort of slow burn romance. I don't kind of want to go into it too much because I definitely think it's one of the movies where you should just kind of watch it and form your own opinion on it.
Yeah.
But I love the film and I thought it was excellent. Anyway, what
Yeah.
was your number five?
My number 5 was 1917. The other cinematography sort of candidate almost.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of these films in this kind of top tier had a lot of great cinematography. There's films that we've got to talk about after this that are also very well shot.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably a theme within this age of directing is that the cinematography is really good.
Mm.
Like
Like
I
just
think that there's a great
alone,
focus on cinematography. Yeah.
yeah. Well, just with pretty much every film I've talked about before, like Portrait of a Lady on Fire, downwards to Waves, all of those films had excellent cinematography.
Yeah.
And it certainly makes a film great if you can do cinematography well. But 1917, what is special about it?
Oh, well, I thought it was a remarkable film. Like it could be that the cinematography swayed my opinion a bit too much, but I don't. I thought it was really good. Yeah, that's pretty much. It. Yes.
So it's at number 5 just because of the cinematography.
No, well, the story was quite good as well. Like, I can see that you've said that it could be better, but that's with most stories. Anyway, um, yeah, I just thought it was quite a remarkable film. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, again, if you kind of want to hear more in-depth thoughts, check out the first episode of the podcast where we talked about this.
Yeah.
But essentially, my grievance with the film was I thought that I didn't think it was very well paced, and I thought that the script could have been a lot stronger. The technical elements were all there. I fully agree. I thought that the one-shot technique by Roger Deakins was excellent. It had a lot of interesting lighting and everything, but it's really the script that I was so disinterested and didn't care about either of the characters, especially kind of the guy who is revealed to be the main character, which is kind of spoiler territory, which I won't go into, but that was essentially my kind of big problem with it and why it didn't make my top 10. Certainly not a bad film by any means, but I did have problems with it.
Yeah, well, I thought it was really good. Like, I actually did feel a connection with the main character, and it could have been better, obviously, but I thought it was that there was definitely one there. Well, that was me watching it. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. So,
my number 4, I
yeah.
guess. My number 4 film is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. Do you like this movie, Oliver?
I do like that. I just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. I gave it 10 out of 10. It's my second favorite film of the year.
Yes.
And it's so good. It's like, I think that because I just feel like I'm going over the same points over and over again. So I think that with most of these, well, especially in my list, if they've been nominated for Best Picture, you should go back to episode 1 because we actually go in depth on them there. But
yeah.
It was such a great film. Like, it really sort of it showed Quentin's love for Golden Age Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that because you can kind of see throughout other Quentin films that he always likes to kind of do duo characters. Like look back to Django, which you also love. You have Schultz and Django are kind of a cool pair.
Yeah.
But I've got to say, I think that the partnership between Leo and Brad Pitt was like the best kind of pair of characters that Tarantino's done, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I don't know. I came into the film expecting an incredible Leo performance, but I got an incredible Brad performance.
Yeah.
Right? So I didn't feel that much of a connection with Leo's character. You know?
Oh, really?
Really. So in that regard, I thought that the Django partnership could be better.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, between this and Sam Jackson and John Travolta in Pulp Fiction, for me, for like the best kind of Tarantino duo.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Because I just thought that the chemistry that Leo and Brad had, it was like they'd been longtime friends. Even though I'm not sure if they'd actually ever worked together before. But yeah, I thought that they had great chemistry. And another thing that I liked about the movie was I actually liked what they did with Margot Robbie's character. We kind of talked about this in the other episode, but a lot of people were like, oh, she was very underused. But I feel like if Tarantino gave her character, who is based on a real person, Sharon Tate, who was brutally murdered in real life, if he gave her a bunch of Tarantino quippy dialogue, it would almost feel out of place and almost disrespectful.
Yeah, exactly. And in interviews after, Margot Robbie was talking about how the whole time she was trying to pay like respect and pay homage to Sharon Tate the best way she could.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the reason it's at number 4, it's a film that I personally enjoy a lot. Like with all the other films I've talked about, I can kind of rewatch this one the most because it's just a very funny and enjoyable film.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so
uh,
too.
my only kind of little problem with it was I thought there were a few um, kind of pacing issues with it. There's this part. This was kind of the only problem I found with it. There's this part where um, there's like a 6-month time jump,
Yeah,
and there's so much kind of exposition and voiceover from Kurt Russell's character needed to kind of explain what's happened. But my
yeah,
thoughts were, personally, you don't really need to have that stuff. You could have just cut that out and just have the next day being what happened at Leo's house at nighttime. I think you know what I'm referring to.
yeah,
Um, I think it would have just made it a lot more smoother.
yeah. I think
Um,
so too, because there was a yeah,
yeah,
it was
'cause
weird. Yeah,
they still did all the kind of build up. You know, there was that whole part where both Leo and Margot Robbie were out at night before the whole climax of the film, and it was still building enough tension. You know, but I thought that kind of time jump was very sort of unnecessary.
yeah. Well, I think that that must have been as like a thing that happened in Golden Age Hollywood is that they'd send out, washed up sort of actors and actresses overseas to go in big budget films over there, and then they
Yeah,
just come back like 8 months later and they haven't improved their reputation or anything like that. I think that was the point that Quentin was trying to get at, you know?
no, I get that, but what I'm saying is I think that, you know, he's already done an incredible amount of kind of homage to Golden Age
Exactly.
and that inclusion of that time jump while being kind of an important thing that would have happened to a lot of those actors at the time, it still made the pacing of the film feel a bit off.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
when I watch the movie on with my Blu-ray, I usually skip that part and just kind of go to the next kind of scene because I find it quite dull.
Yeah.
But still, very excellent movie. Enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
So,
And
what
so
is your number 4, Oliver?
my number 4 is The Lighthouse,
Whew,
which, yeah.
Lighthouse. I mean, I'll discuss my views on Lighthouse a bit later down this list, but I thought it was great. What did you think of it?
Well, it's my first 10 out of 10 on this list. And well, it was really like it surprised me because the first bit of it, I wasn't sure where this was going to go because I'd heard
Yeah,
and seen the
yeah.
trailer. And I was like, okay, they're going to go crazy. Like I didn't know what was going to happen, but then it was really well done, I think. And it's hard
Mm.
to sort of because it's such a slow burn almost. It's hard to talk about it. I think after, you know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I definitely think that it's a movie to kind of not spoil and let other people just kind of watch it.
Yeah,
Because it really stuck with me after seeing it, and I kind of thought about what it was supposed to be representing, and it took me like a couple of days before I settled on my theory on what it's about. But I thought that it had such a unique style. It had a very closed-in aspect ratio, and it was shot in black and white, 35 millimeter,
yeah,
which was certainly interesting. You don't really see films like that these days.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly. So they've tried to go for a different style, and they've got great acting and that sort of thing. So
oh,
it's
Willem Dafoe, I thought could have been one of the best performances of the year for sure.
yeah, well,
Um,
he's a super good actor, and he's in the French Dispatch coming soon as well.
oh yeah, the new Wes Anderson, that should be interesting.
Yeah, have you
Uh,
seen the cast for it though? It's like, oh my god.
yeah, there's, I think Bill Murray, Timmy Chalamet is in it.
Benicio
Francis
del
McDormand,
Toro, Tilda Swinton, you know her,
yeah.
and then Adrian Brody, who won an Oscar,
It was
Saoirse Ronan, Elizabeth Moss.
it was a
Oh,
really interesting film, I thought. Like for the Lighthouse.
Yeah, and Willem Dafoe in The French Dispatch. Like, well, this movie is coming later on. Wes Anderson, sorry, he's a really good director and highly rated, I guess. But then the cast for The French Dispatch, like, I don't know, I'm sort of geeking out on it, but it's really.
Yeah, I'm quite looking forward to it. It should be hopefully it's one of the best of 2020. Not that
Oh,
probably will be a 2021 film now
yeah,
because everything's been pushed back.
yeah.
Yeah.